And then you would discover people like David Gilmour, who would be more of a composed solo. To me, just as a kid with ADD and growing up in the 80s and 90s, it was just more fun to just shred over the blues.
Joe Bonamassa names his 5 favorite blues or rock songs. In music, memory is selective and unforgiving. The songs that endure are not always the loudest or most celebrated. They are the ones that stayed when everything else fell away. For musicians, those records become private touchstones, shaping instinct long before success arrives. Joe Bonamassa grew up surrounded by other people's greatness. Before theaters and collector guitars, there were records spinning late at night, teaching lessons no classroom could. These weren't casual influences, they were standards to measure himself against. The blues and rock canon is crowded with legends, but only a few recordings carry lasting truth. Songs that don't impress at first, listen, but haunt you years later. Songs that reveal restraint, pain, discipline, and defiance. When Bonamassa names his 5 favorite blues and rock songs, the list isn't about popularity, it's about survival. Why these songs and not others? What do they reveal about the musician he chose to become? Subscribe for more stories that treat music as legacy, not trivia. Because these 5 songs didn't just influence Joe Bonamassa, they shaped the spine of his sound. The Thrill Is Gone, B.B. King's masterclass in restraint. This song isn't about speed or firepower, it's about control. Bonamassa has often pointed to this recording as proof that the blues doesn't need excess to devastate. The space between the notes does the talking. From the moment the strings sigh rather than scream, the song teaches a lesson many guitarists never learn. Emotion lands harder when you leave room for it to breathe. For Bonamassa, this track represents maturity, the moment when blues stopped being about showing strength and started being about revealing vulnerability. What makes The Thrill Is Gone endure is not complexity, but discipline. The song unfolds at its own pace, unbothered by expectations. B.B. King's guitar never competes with the vocal. It listens. Each phrase feels weighed, as though it has passed through doubt before reaching the listener. In an era where guitarists often tried to overwhelm, King chose to persuade. That choice quietly redefined what authority in blues music could sound like, grounded in confidence rather than confrontation. Bonamassa has often reflected on how difficult that lesson truly is. Early ambition pushes players toward excess, faster runs, louder amplifiers, more notes packed into every bar. The Thrill Is Gone dismantles that instinct in real time. It proves that silence is not absence, but tension. The pauses between phrases don't weaken the song, they tighten it. They force the listener to lean forward. You have to make the guitar sing, not shout. There is also a structural elegance at work that reveals itself slowly. The phrasing never rushes toward resolution. Each bend seems to arrive slightly late, as if weighted by memory. That delay creates emotional gravity. The song feels lived in, not performed. Bonamassa has described this as one of the first recordings that made him understand tone as narrative. Before technique, before speed, sound itself was already telling the story. Lyrically, the song refuses melodrama. There is heartbreak, but no panic. The pain has already settled into certainty. That acceptance is what gives the song its authority. The narrator isn't pleading for understanding or bargaining for closure. He is stating a fact. Something has ended, and pretending otherwise would be dishonest. For Bonamassa, that honesty became a blueprint. The blues, at its most powerful, doesn't beg, it confesses. This track also reshaped how Bonamassa thought about leadership within a band. B.B. King doesn't dominate the arrangement, he guides it. The guitar, the strings, and the rhythm section exist in conversation rather than hierarchy. Every part knows when to step forward and when to retreat. That balance became central to Bonamassa's own approach as a band leader, where clarity matters more than volume and cohesion matters more than ego. Perhaps most importantly, the thrill is gone, revealed that restraint requires confidence. Only a musician secure in their voice can afford to say less. Bonamassa has noted that this kind of control cannot be faked or rehearsed into existence. It comes from knowing exactly what you want to express and trusting that the listener will meet you halfway. That trust, once earned, becomes unbreakable and deeply personal. Decades after its release, the song remains a quiet challenge to anyone who picks up a guitar. Can you resist the urge to prove yourself? Can you let a note hang without rushing to justify it? Can you accept that emotional weight doesn't come from volume, but from patience, conviction, and belief? The thrill is gone doesn't overwhelm. It endures. And for Joe Bonamassa, it stands as a reminder that the blues does not reward impatience or excess. It rewards truth, delivered slowly, deliberately, and without apology. Crossroads, Cream's collision of tradition and rebellion. This recording sits at the fault line between eras. Rooted in the Delta but amplified for a louder, faster world, it showed what happens when reverence meets defiance. Bonamassa has cited this performance as a turning point where the blues stopped looking backward and began charging forward. The guitar doesn't ask permission here. It dares the listener to keep up. And in that daring, Bonamassa found proof that honoring tradition doesn't mean staying small. What makes Crossroads so seismic is not just its volume or speed, but its attitude. This was blues stripped of deference. The song respects its origins, but it refuses to bow to them. The structure is familiar, yet the execution feels confrontational, almost urgent. Bonamassa has described hearing this track as realizing that the blues could survive outside museums and memory. It could live on stage, sweating, reckless, and alive. The performance carries a sense of risk that is impossible to fake, to either commit or collapse. There is no space to hide, no safety net. Crossroads doesn't polish its edges, it sharpens them. It sounds like a band discovering its limits in real time and daring itself to push past them anyway. For Bonamassa, this recording reframed the role of the guitarist. The instrument is no longer just a voice of sorrow or reflection. It becomes a force of confrontation. Each phrase challenges the next, escalating rather than resolving. This is what happens when the blues refuses to behave. That refusal became essential to Bonamassa's own evolution, especially as he navigated a genre often burdened by reverence. There is also a generational defiance embedded in the sound. Crossroads feels like a response to history rather than a repetition of it. The past is present, but it isn't in control. Bonamassa has often pointed out that this was the moment blues stopped apologizing for being loud. It didn't abandon its roots. It amplified them until they demanded attention from a new audience. The recording also demonstrated the power of reinterpretation. Crossroads had existed before, but never like this. Bonamassa learned that honoring a song doesn't require imitation. It requires conviction. You have to believe that your version deserves to exist. This lesson would later inform how he approached covers throughout his career. Not as tributes, but as conversations across time. There is an almost reckless joy in the performance, a sense that restraint has been consciously discarded. That joy matters. Bonamassa has spoken about how blues music can sometimes mistake seriousness for authenticity. Crossroads rejects that idea completely. It is exuberant, aggressive, and unapologetic. It proves that intensity and respect are not opposites. They can coexist, if you're willing to take the risk. What also stands out is the collective momentum. The song doesn't belong to one instrument. It surges as a unit, each part pushing the others harder. That communal force left a deep impression on Bonamassa, shaping how he later built bands that thrive on interaction rather than hierarchy. Energy, once shared, becomes unstoppable. In the end, Crossroads isn't about rebellion for its own sake. It's about expansion. It takes a tradition and stretches it until it can hold more noise, more youth, more urgency. For Bonamassa, that expansion was liberating. It meant the blues didn't have to remain fixed in time. It could evolve without erasing itself. Crossroads doesn't look back to ask permission. It looks forward and accelerates. And in that forward motion, Joe Bonamassa found the confidence to believe that preserving the blues sometimes means pushing it to the edge and stepping beyond it anyway. Since I've Been Loving You, Led Zeppelin's slow-burning confession. There is nothing polite about this song. It bleeds in real time. Bonamassa has spoken about the way its imperfections make it human, how the strain in the vocals and the ache in the guitar feel almost intrusive, like overhearing something private. This track taught him that blues rock doesn't need polish to be powerful. Sometimes the cracks are the point. Sometimes pain, left unedited, becomes timeless. What separates Since I've Been Loving You from most blues rock recordings is its willingness to stay uncomfortable. The song doesn't rush toward release or resolution. It lingers inside tension, allowing exhaustion, regret, and longing to surface naturally. Bonamassa has described it as a performance that sounds less like musicians playing and more like people unraveling in front of microphones. That vulnerability is not staged. It's exposed. The guitar work is central to that exposure. Every bend feels strained, almost painful, as if the strings themselves are resisting. Notes waver, timing slips, and instead of weakening the performance, those flaws deepen it. Bonamassa learned from this track that precision is not always the goal. Truth is, the guitar doesn't aim to impress. It confesses. Perfection would have ruined this song. Vocally, the performance borders on collapse. The voice pushes past comfort, cracking under emotional weight. Bonamassa has often pointed out that this strain is what makes the song unforgettable. You can hear the effort. You can hear the cost. In a genre sometimes dominated by bravado, Since I've Been Loving You chooses exposure over dominance. It shows what happens when emotion overrides control. This song also reframed Bonamassa's understanding of endurance. Blues rock here is not explosive. It is sustained. The intensity builds slowly, minute by minute, without shortcuts. That slow burn taught him that emotional payoff doesn't have to arrive quickly to be devastating. Sometimes the longest road leaves the deepest mark. There is a sense of inevitability woven into the performance. From the opening notes, you feel that this song will not resolve cleanly. The tension is the destination. Bonamassa has described this as one of the first recordings that made him comfortable with letting discomfort remain unresolved in his own music. Not every story needs closure. Some truths exist simply to be acknowledged. The band's restraint is equally instructive. Despite the emotional chaos at the center, the arrangement never collapses. Everything holds together just enough to keep the song upright. That balance between control and collapse fascinated Bonamassa. It showed him that structure doesn't eliminate emotion. It gives it a frame strong enough to survive. Since I've Been Loving You also challenged the idea that strength in music must sound confident. Here, strength sounds exhausted. It sounds uncertain. Bonamassa has noted that this song gave him permission to let fatigue and doubt exist inside a performance without hiding them. The blues, at its core, is not about triumph. It's about persistence. What lingers most is the intimacy. This doesn't feel like a song meant for an audience. It feels like a moment accidentally captured. Bonamassa has described listening to it as feeling like an intruder, witnessing something not meant to be shared. That intimacy changed how he approached recording, reminding him that the microphone captures vulnerability. Decades later, the song still feels raw because it never tried to be timeless. It simply told the truth of the moment. For Bonamassa, that honesty became a guiding principle. You don't preserve emotion by refining it. You preserve it by leaving it alone. Since I've Been Loving You doesn't ask to be admired. It asks to be endured. And in enduring it, Joe Bonamassa learned that the most powerful blues rock doesn't shout its pain. It lets you hear it breathing, breaking, and surviving in real time. Still Got the Blues. Gary Moore's Late Life Reckoning. This song arrived like a confession, delivered too late to take back. Bonamassa has admired how it sounds both defiant and exhausted, a reminder that the blues doesn't disappear with success or age. It waits. The phrasing is deliberate, almost heavy, as if every note carries history behind it. For Bonamassa, this track proved that returning to the blues isn't retreating. It's coming home with scars worth showing. What makes Still Got the Blues so arresting is its sense of inevitability. The song doesn't announce itself as a comeback or a statement. It simply arrives, unadorned and unapologetic, carrying the weight of everything that came before it. Bonamassa has described hearing it as realizing that the blues never truly leaves a musician. It recedes. It stays quiet. And then, when the moment demands honesty, it resurfaces. The guitar tone alone feels like a lifetime compressed into sound. Each bend stretches just past comfort, lingering long enough to feel almost painful. There is no urgency to impress here, only the need to be understood. Bonamassa has often pointed to this performance as a masterclass in letting the instrument speak plainly. No disguise, no spectacle, just truth, exposed and unguarded. This is what honesty sounds like. There is also a profound restraint embedded in the phrasing. Despite Moore's reputation for speed and power, the song resists excess. Notes are chosen carefully, as if each one has earned its place. That restraint struck Bonamassa deeply. It reinforced the idea that mastery isn't about how much you can do, but how little you need to say to be heard. Emotionally, the song feels reflective rather than dramatic. The pain is not raw anymore. It has settled into something quieter, heavier, more permanent. Bonamassa has noted that this is what separates youthful blues from seasoned blues. One cries out, the other accepts. Still Got the Blues lives in that acceptance, and that is where its authority comes from. The vocal performance mirrors that gravity. There is no attempt to sound young or urgent. The voice carries wear, and it doesn't hide it. For Bonamassa, this was liberating. It challenged the idea that relevance requires reinvention. Sometimes relevance comes from returning to the core of who you are, without apology or explanation. This track also reframed Bonamassa's understanding of legacy. Still Got the Blues isn't about reclaiming past glory. It's about acknowledging continuity. The blues thread runs through every phase of a musician's life, whether it is visible or not. Moore didn't abandon the blues. He lived long enough to circle back to it with clarity. There is a humility in that return that Bonamassa deeply respects. The song doesn't posture as a definitive statement. It simply tells the truth of the moment. That humility became a guiding principle in Bonamassa's own career, reminding him that evolution doesn't mean erasure, it means integration. Musically, the arrangement leaves space for reflection. Nothing crowds the melody, nothing competes for attention. That openness allows the emotion to breathe. Bonamassa has often emphasized how important this space is, especially in blues music. Without space, emotion suffocates. With it, it resonates. Perhaps most powerfully, Still Got the Blues proves that vulnerability does not diminish strength. It deepens it. The song doesn't hide fatigue or regret. It embraces them as evidence of survival. For Bonamassa, that message was transformative. The blues doesn't demand perfection. It demands presence. In the end, this song doesn't ask to be celebrated. It asks to be believed. And in believing it, Joe Bonamassa learned that the blues is not a phase you outgrow. It's a truth you eventually return to when you're ready to stop pretending you ever left. Texas Flood. Stevie Ray Vaughan's declaration of identity. This is not just a song, it's a statement. Bonamassa has described this performance as a blueprint for modern blues guitar, where power and finesse exist in uneasy balance. Every bend sounds like a risk. Every pause feels earned. It showed him that authenticity isn't borrowed, it's claimed. And once claimed, it demands everything you have to give. What makes Texas Flood so defining is its refusal to compromise. From the opening notes, the guitar announces itself with authority, but never arrogance. The tone is thick, almost oppressive, yet controlled with surgical precision. Bonamassa has often pointed out that this balance is what separates imitation from identity. Stevie Ray Vaughan wasn't playing the blues to honor someone else. He was carving out space for himself inside it. The song carries a sense of exposure that feels dangerous. Each note hangs long enough to invite judgment. There is no rush to hide behind speed or flash. Vaughan allows the guitar to linger in discomfort, bending notes until they nearly break. Bonamassa has cited this as one of the most important lessons of his early listening years. If you want to be believed, you have to be willing to be vulnerable in public. You have to mean every note. There is also an unmistakable physicality to the performance. Texas Flood doesn't float. It presses down. The rhythm feels heavy and deliberate, as if the song is dragging its own weight forward. That heaviness fascinated Bonamassa. It showed him that groove in the blues isn't about looseness. It's about commitment. Every note lands because it has no other choice. This track also redefined what confidence could sound like. Vaughan never rushes to prove himself, yet nothing about the performance feels tentative. Bonamassa learned that confidence in blues guitar isn't about dominance. It's about ownership. The sound belongs to the player, not the other way around. You hear that ownership in every phrase of Texas Flood. Emotionally, the song walks a thin line between control and abandon. The pain is unmistakable, but it's never allowed to spill into chaos. Bonamassa has spoken about how difficult that balance is to achieve. Too much restraint, and the song feels hollow. Too much abandon, and it collapses. Texas Flood holds that tension without resolving it, and that unresolved state is where its power lives. The song also challenged Bonamassa's understanding of endurance. This isn't a short burst of intensity. It's sustained pressure. Vaughan holds the listener inside the emotion for its entire duration, never offering relief. Bonamassa has noted that this endurance is what makes the song exhausting and exhilarating at the same time, demanding full attention from start to finish. There is a sense of inevitability in the phrasing, as if each note was always meant to follow the last. That inevitability creates trust. The listener believes the performance because it feels unavoidable. Bonamassa has often said that this is what he strives for in his own playing, a feeling that the music could not have existed any other way. Texas Flood also became a lesson in restraint through power. Despite Vaughan's technical ability, the song never becomes a showcase. Technique serves emotion, not ego. That hierarchy left a lasting impression on Bonamassa, shaping his belief that skill only matters if it deepens the story being told. In the end, Texas Flood doesn't ask permission to exist. It asserts itself, and in that assertion, Joe Bonamassa found a model for what it means to truly claim the blues, not as an inheritance, but as a responsibility carried forward, demanding honesty, courage, and commitment, note by uncompromising note. Taken together, these 5 songs are not a playlist. They are a map. Each one marks a moment where the blues refused to stay still, where honesty mattered more than comfort, and where identity was forged under pressure. Joe Bonamassa's choices reveal something deeper than taste. They reveal a philosophy. These recordings taught him that restraint can be louder than speed, that pain doesn't need decoration, and that tradition only survives when it's challenged. The blues, in his hands, is not a relic. It's a responsibility carried forward. Beyond the stages and the amplifiers, this is why it matters. Because great music isn't about sounding timeless. It's about telling the truth of your moment so clearly that time can't erase it. Which of these songs speaks to you the most, and why? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And if you value stories that treat music as legacy, not nostalgia, consider subscribing for more reflections like this. Some songs fade, others keep teaching us how to listen, long after the final note.